So now, ladies and gentlemen, live and in colour, it's Mr. Wayne Lovejuice.
The other day our producer Louis had a chat with an interesting chappie who said that the YouTube algorithms really aren't that happy. If a channel only broadcasts once a week, so we've decided we can text ya whenever we've got a piece of news in our new book on the track Xtra. ASSAP, the Association for Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena, was founded in 1981 and is generally considered to be one of the most important Fortean organisations in the world. They recently had their annual conference, and Richard Freeman was there both as a speaker and to cover the event for CFZtv.
This interview is with my old friend Peter Laws, who is a vicar, a horror author, a aficionado of the horror genre, a horror critic who writes for Fortean Times, and a Fortean researcher. And his talk was about how ghost hunting and interest in the paranormal is developing almost into a new religion.
This is my old friend Peter Laws.
Hi.
Who is not only an ordained minister, but he's a horror author and a film critic and a huge buff of the horror genre.
Yeah.
And he's interested in Forteana, and has been giving a talk on how ghost hunting and interest in the paranormal is becoming like a new religion. So could you expand on that a bit, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to explore the idea of how, particularly through my own life, I grew up being very antagonistic towards Christianity, and then became a Christian in my early 20s, which was unexpected because most people my age, from the kind of 70s onwards, as in the 1970s onwards, have kind of abandoned religion. And so I was talking about how, on the whole, people are moving away from organised religion, but they're not necessarily becoming atheists and skeptics. There's this big growing space in between. They call them the nons, where they're not religiously affiliated, but that they are interested in the supernatural and spirituality. And it's that group where the paranormal people come in. And I was talking about in my talk there about how religion and paranormal pursuits are quite similar. They both kind of ask similar questions. Basically, is there anyone there? But also, is there anyone there, as in around me, who also has similar interests? So I was talking about that.
Yeah, I've been told by several Muslims they believe in these spirits called jinn, which are supposed to be made out of smokeless fire. They say they can manifest as dragons, as big hairy ape-like creatures, as demonic black dogs, as huge black cats and monstrous birds, which is
that covers
basically that's the roster of the global monster template.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
in Islam,
sorry.
that they seem to embrace the supernatural.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but it was because I thought I said something similar in the sense that because there's all of these people who may have had a spiritual background or they just don't find a spiritual home, they're in the middle, they get into the paranormal, it's not a surprise to see over the last 40 years a kind of a ramping up of spiritual language in the paranormal space. So people thinking UFOs might actually be, gods from another planet, for example, or Bigfoot may be, a jinn or that sort of thing. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, I come from a very scientific background, and I got into it with a very scientific bent to it. But I've come to conclude that some of it, not all of it, but some of it is paranormal, for want of a better word. Some people might call it spiritual, they might call it supernatural, but it's something from elsewhere, from the outside.
Yeah, And actually, the terminology is important because the word spiritual has so much baggage to it. But really, it is just supernatural. It's just whatever is beyond the norm of known science. And so spirituality is a way of describing that. But you're quite right. Just paranormal is quite enough. But the reason I say that is just because some people can actually get quite offended if you suggest that their paranormal interests may have a spiritual element, because they'll think, wait, you're saying I'm ultimately aiming for God? And I'm like, no, I'm just saying you're not a total rationalist or an atheist, and neither are you regularly going to church, and so you're in this mid-space, and that's a wild west of ideas, and this is what we're seeing, particularly with
a friend of mine sort of had the reverse happen to him, because there's a guy called Mike Hallowell, who was mainly a parapsychologist, and he had a son convert to Islam, and then this imam from Egypt got talking to him about ghosts and stuff, and he said, well, they're jinn, and you are a jinn hunter, you were born to hunt jinn.
Wow.
And he converted to Islam, and he's a full-on Muslim now.
Wow.
So he went the other way.
Yeah.
So you've had a bit of pushback, haven't you, from sort of fundamental Christians?
I've had it in a few ways. In one way, I've just had predictable pushback in the sense that I'm a kind of Christian progressive. So I'm really, if people would sit down with me, they would probably think, actually, you're quite normal, because I'm not anti-evolution, I'm not anti-gay, I'm not anti-other religions, all that sort of thing. So you can get some kickback from that. I've been banned from one or two places from speaking there because, for example, I'm happy with people being gay. But the more interesting, I suppose, is the people who don't want me there because they think I might have a demon or something, because I love horror films, because I write about spooky things, and they think maybe I'm possessed. But who knows, maybe I am. Maybe this is picking up some tall black rabbit behind me.
That rabbit ghost. In Japan, they believe in this thing called mureo, which is a giant grave-robbing rabbit that digs up corpses and eats their livers. And the way to kill it, it's like a vampire, but you don't stake it through the heart, you stake it through the throat.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's weird. Rabbits turn up in the paranormal more than you'd think.
Yeah, and I mean, as well as writing non-fiction, I write fiction as well, and so a few novels out since 2017. And they have a recurring theme of a kind of demonic black rabbit, or a kind of legion of these rabbit-shaped kind of creatures. But that's only because, like, when I was younger, I haven't really had many paranormal experiences myself, but I had an experience with my friends ghost hunting and seeing some sort of shape on top of the roof of an old kind of asylum, which looked a little bit like a tall rabbit standing on its legs, but not like a kind of fantastic Mr. Fox style, like a rabbit, more like a fusion of rabbit and human. But it was like a silhouette. But it really freaked me out.
And was this ultimately investigated by the Warrens?
See, that's why you get paid the big bucks. That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. So I like this topic, but but I'm quite happy to exist in that space in between. And what's been interesting is, after talking about it today, I've had quite a lot of people coming up and saying it resonates, that they also exist within that grey middle. I mean, it can be the case where people think you've got to choose your side. You have to pick, which team you're on, and that just doesn't appeal to like growing numbers of people.
Well, Forteans in general should be suspicious of any paradigm that covers everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the old Fortean adage, you measure a circle beginning at anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm a Fortean, I don't have an opinion.
And I take it, I know there is also a risk that if you are so open-minded that your brain falls out. That's the phrase, isn't it? But I was saying as well in the talk that you can't have a scenario in which kind of the beauty of the paranormal world is that there are so many different opinions and theories, but then it becomes like a very messy, confusing world where one person will say a ghost is a demon, another one will say it's a skinwalker, or it'll be like a sleep paralysis thing, or it might be a shadow person.
I always think that's just semantics. It's just different cultures with their filters for the same phenomenon.
Well, it is, but some of those things are quite different. So for someone to say that's a ghost, the spirit of a departed loved one, so like benign, let's say, it's quite different from someone saying that is an actual demon from hell sent to confuse or to possess me.
There are some people that think that all ghosts are demons and they're just pretending to be dead humans.
Yes, that and that's a very common thing I hear in the Christian world. And so if you're talking to old Uncle Rupert on the Ouija board, they would say that's not him. That's a demon pretending to be Rupert to try and distract you from God or whatever. But then I've heard that said about UFOs and aliens.
Yes, well, there's the whole satanic sources thing.
Yeah.
And then there's Aleister Crowley at Loch Ness, and his experiments with the ritual of Abramelin in the Mage. And you know that Loch Ness was exorcised.
Yes.
In 1973 by what was his name? The Reverend Dr. Donald Orman exorcised it because he thought the Loch Ness monster was this monstrous entity.
Did he claim that it had worked?
Well, he exercised it at the 4 points and at the centre, but it failed miserably because people still see the Loch Ness monster. It's written about. There's a book called The Dragon and the Disc by F.W. Holiday. If you've never read it, it's a really interesting read. And he thought that all lake monsters were these evil spiritual serpents that were linked to the original serpent in the Garden of Eden. And he thinks that all this with serpent and dragon mythology comes from these evil creatures.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So it's fascinating for people who are open-minded, like maybe we are. It's a kind of just a smorgasbord of cool stories and monsters and ghosts and that's quite appealing. But it's not appealing to everyone. For some people, it's really quite.
I think it'd be frightening, for people from a certain background.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've noticed is like the skepticism becoming a mystique in itself.
Right.
Becoming almost like a cult. And skeptics being sort of treated like saints, and I've found them to be the worst cherry pickers of any people.
Well, I mean, I've got skeptic friends, and they're great, and I find them to be very genuine. But I'm sure, there are people in all fields.
And there are people like Hayley Stevens who are great, and Ben Radford, but there are others. I won't mention names. Who are incredibly rude, and unbelievably arrogant.
Yeah, but then you're dead right. But I just feel like every worldview has their annoying people, I guess. But for most of the people I know we're all in this. To me, I feel like we're all on the same journey together, like trying to figure out where we're going. Is there anything else or not? And a lot of these questions come from a kind of a search for security, particularly in the face of death, but also a search for significance. We want to know that we matter. And for some people, the thought of God loving us, it obviously really does make you think, wow, I'm made for a reason. So that's quite psychologically soothing. But I think a lot of what we do just in general life, we're looking for security in our finances and our relationships, and that's a very human, normal thing. So I tend to always have sympathy for anyone who's searching, and I think everyone's searching at whatever they're looking for. I see a vulnerable, scared person who's trying to figure it out. That's what I am. I'm scared of death and suffering and stuff, and that's what fuels my interest.
I always hope that if there is an afterlife, there's some sort of debriefing afterwards. Say,
debriefing.
That's what this was all about.
I see what you mean. Right? Yeah. I like that idea. I also like the idea of if there's an afterlife, that there would be a library of everybody else's life, and that you could go and say, what am I going to take out of the library this week? I'm going to take out Richard Freeman's life. I'm going to now live his life and see what it was like to be Richard Freeman. or anybody, or like Elvis, or just like choose. But if you wanted to, you could live out the entirety of their lives, not reincarnation, but just purely as an entertainment source.
Yeah.
That would be like, instead of like renting videos, some Blockbuster back in the day, you're renting out lives. But that's my weird sci-fi brain.
Well, thanks a lot, Pete.
Thank you. No,
Cheers,
thanks for
mate.
asking such good questions.
Thank you very much.
And that's the end of another episode of On the Track Extra. I want to say a big, big thank you to Richard, who's still over there in the corner. Wave for boys and girls, Richard. He's looking very, very languid. I want to say a big thank you to Richard for doing all these interviews at ASSAP, and I want to say a very big thank you to ASSAP for allowing us to film there. And this week in particular, I want to say a big thank you to Peter Laws. I'd not heard of Peter before, but I'm very interested in what he has to say. And as a Fortean Christian myself, I think that I'm going to ask him sooner rather than later if he'd like to come on the show and talk about stuff, because I think he seems like a smashing fellow and the sort of person that I would really enjoy having a chat with. I'll be back on Saturday with another show that I have no idea what it is, so don't ask me because I don't know. And I'll be back here next Wednesday with Richard Freeman, him over there in the corner, because we've got one more visit to the ASSAP Conference 2022. So until then, be seeing you.